Hey guys, I'm going to talk about my Elite Four experience in Pokemon X and Y. Now, for me, the Elite Four is always one of the biggest things about any Pokemon game. I guess it's the end goal. It's the thing you've been training the entire time for. It's the big bad. And ever since the fourth generation, where I got my ass kicked by the Elite Four, possibly because I was underleveled, I've taken quite a bit of care and strategy in designing my team for the Elite Four. Now, before I continue, I may as well point out that for X and Y, I had absolutely no clue what the Elite Four's typing would be, what the levels were, what Pokemon they had, and I had no idea who the final boss was, what Pokemon she had, or anything about that at all. I designed my team based upon what I was worried about fighting and what types I knew would give me good coverage, basically. So, I am by no means a professional competitor at all. I just, things I was afraid of, I tried to prepare for. So the first Pokemon I had was Greninja. He was my starter. He was water, so I definitely didn't need to get another water Pokemon after that. He was also dark, and I pretty much loaded him up with fighting moves. I didn't really have any sort of like crazy strategy with him. It was just get strong moves, kick ass, basically. Now this is one of the ones I EV trained, so I wanted to make sure that he was very, very fast and very, very hard hitting on the attack side. I gave him Surf anyway, because it's nice to have sort of a little mixed thing, but he had Surf, Night Slash, Water Shrieking, because why not have a kick-ass water quick attack thing, and also Acrobatics. Now Acrobatics is a flying move, which helps him sort of defeat grass Pokemon sometimes, as well as fighting Pokemon, so it's a little risky though, but I knew he was very, very fast, because I had EV trained him, and he was fast anyway. I didn't load him up with an item, obviously, for that reason. So he was the easiest one to figure out. I also really liked Florges. I really, really liked Florges. I don't know what that says about me, that I liked the weird little flower pixie Pokemon, but I knew I wanted a fairy Pokemon because of dragons. I was always worried about dragons, even though they're not as powerful as they once were. And I figured a pure fairy type would be very strong, so I got the Florges. It ended up being a very, very strong special defensive wall, and its special attack wasn't bad either, so I kind of gave him some more HP with the EVs I had left, and I gave him some good attacks. I gave him Moon Blast, which is a very good fairy attack, as well as Petal Dance and Petal Blizzard to be my pseudo-grass Pokemon. I basically just wanted the fairy attack, but since he had good grass attacks anyway, it was kind of a little bit of a bonus. I also gave him Wish, which I don't think I ever used, so kind of there as a backup. I also wanted a fire Pokemon. I always like having at least one fire Pokemon. And there's a lot of choices in this game. There's just a lot. I could have used the Charizard. He was a Mega Charizard even, but for some reason I didn't. I decided to go with a little bit of a newer Pokemon in Pyroar. I have a female Pyroar, and it's pretty much there for the special side. I EV trained this one as well, so pretty much all of the EVs just went into special attack and speed. It was definitely a special sweeper. And I don't have any regrets about how I trained it. I gave it Overheat, Hyper Voice, Flamethrower, and Crunch. So as you see, it's pretty much just there for the two attacks. I don't know how good of a strategy that is to use up a slot on my 6 Pokemon team for a Pokemon who's only going to use 2 or 3 moves, but that's what I did. I definitely like being able to take out Steel Pokemon, and quickly. Now the rest of my team was a little bit more of a question. I wasn't entirely sure who I would use. Some of the ones I ended up thinking about but not actually using was Aurorus. Aurorus I liked. I liked that it had a lot of HP. I thought it had some interesting moves. It had the Ice move and a Rock move. But the more I looked into it and the more I thought about it, it's not a very good defensive Pokemon, and it definitely gets taken out by a lot of things. So I decided to switch it for something else. I also considered Toxicroak. I wanted that poison Pokemon to take out those fairy Pokemon I knew I would have to deal with. I also had things like a Pavilion and the Charizard and a Pangoro that I used for a while, but none of them ever really made it onto that team. So the 3 that remain, first one was Aegislash, or Aegislash? 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 I was a little concerned about this one. I really liked the Pokemon. I thought it was a really cool addition. I liked the whole Ghost Steel thing, even though it got nerfed a little bit, the Steel side of things. I liked his attacks. He had really strong attacks. I wasn't necessarily sure how his mechanics would work with King's Shield. So I was a little rough when it came to that. He still definitely helped out, but I still am not 100% comfortable with him switching between his forms. The moves I gave him were Iron Head, King's Shield, Sacred Sword, and Shadow Sneak. Shadow Sneak was nice because he could move first and he had really high attack anyway, and then the other two were just kind of heavy-hitting moves. The last two were an interesting conversation in my head. I wanted that poison Pokemon because I was worried about the fairy Pokemon. But I realized something. There was a strong fairy mix Pokemon that I hadn't seen yet, and I figured I would have to fight. And if I fought it with, say, Toxicroak, it could take me out. That being the Pokemon whose name escapes me. But essentially the psychic and fairy Pokemon, Gardevoir. I was worried as hell about Gardevoir because I think I fought like a Kirlia or something earlier, and I realized that it was really hard to take out and that it didn't have that many weaknesses. So the fighting poison Pokemon was suddenly not a very good idea to face off against the potential like Pokemon that could sweep my team in a Gardevoir. That sounded like a really bad thing. So I went with Nidoking. Now Nidoking is a Pokemon I have liked for a very long time, but it's poison, it's ground, and yeah, poison is taken out by psychic. But I figured if it was not quadruple weak to psychic, that would at least be a better option. He was also part ground, which enabled him to take out a bunch of other Pokemon as well. Now, he was kind of one that had a bunch of mixed when it came to EVs, but essentially I did boost his attack and speed a little bit. Ended up giving him Earthquake, Poison Jab, Mega Horn, but there was one thing I realized in that if he's psychic, or if Gardevoir is psychic and fairy, that means that Poison Jab that's been taking out so many fairy Pokemon would be just neutral. It wouldn't be that big a deal. I realized right before I fought the Elite Four that Ghost was one of the few things that was actually super effective against Gardevoir. So I was like, alright, I got this Shadow Claw TM, I may as well teach it to this Nidoking, because I don't remember what was in that slot. It was probably some other poison move, or maybe a second ground move he had just in case, but he wasn't using it anyway, so I ended up replacing that with Shadow Claw. More on that later. My final Pokemon was Goodra. I don't know why. I think I wanted Aurorus in there, and then I realized Aurorus wasn't that good, so I started playing around with the Goodra and EV trained it, and it was another special defensive wall. Why I had two special defensive walls, I have no idea, but that's what it ended up doing. He had an interesting mix of moves. I have him with Power Whip, Earthquake, Outrage, and Aqua Tail. Goodra looks weird. I don't know why I chose him, but I guess I just figured I had to play around with the new Dragon Pokemon. So, getting to the Elite Four themselves, after I chose that team, was a long, arduous journey. I felt like the victory road was very long in this game, and by the time I actually got to the Elite Four, all my Pokemon were in their 70s, which sounded just so bizarre. When I fought the Elite Four, I quickly realized that my Pokemon, for the first time, were over-leveled. They were higher than the Pokemon teams I was fighting. Probably because of the experience share, giving them experience all over the freaking place. And I kicked their freaking asses. This was definitely the easiest Elite Four I had ever fought. Sure, some of my Pokemon got taken out sometimes, but usually I just wiped the floor with them. When I got to the champion, first of all, I was surprised at who it was. I don't know why I didn't see it coming, that it was the one random person that was friend of other important characters from earlier in the game, but it was a surprise. And then I killed her Pokemon fairly easily. The last Pokemon that came out ended up being the Gardevoir, and I was like, oh man, I am so glad I took preparations against this. Holy crap. Because I was definitely worried about that Gardevoir. Like I said, I pretty much talked you through my mindset when it came to that. And then it Mega Evolved. I was like, oh god, here it is, this is gonna hurt. And then I moved first with Shadow Claw, and I killed it. And that was it. And I beat the Elite Four. It was, like I said, easiest one I had ever fought. I don't know if I just prepared too much or the whole experience share thing kind of ruined that whole training situation, but it was easy. I am curious. You guys have probably already played and finished X and Y. Was your Elite Four experience as easy as mine was? I mean, even in the last game, Black and White, I had problems with just one Pokemon, but this was, I didn't have any problems with any of them. Let me know in the comments section. Was this easy? Was it too easy? Was it just right? Speak your mind. We got one more video to talk about the events after the game's finished, and then we are wrapped up with the X and Y coverage.